In our last video, we added a constructor for the ball and then got the ball on the screen. So let's get it set up so that the ball can move and then bounce off the paddle as well. So I'm going to create a new method. We'll just use something simple like ball.bounce because we want to be able to bounce it off the paddle. And then we'll create that here. Public void bounce. And we'll have ball. We'll set it up so it can move. So that'll work, but as we have the ball bouncing back and forth and changing directions, we might just want to use some variables for this. So I'm going to have movement X and movement Y, and we'll declare those up here so that everybody can access them. I can't remember if they're integers or doubles, so we'll try doubles. Double mx equals 10. Double my equals 10. And you can change it, of course, to whatever speed you want. Compile them and execute. And that's moving so fast, I imagine, that we are going to need to pause things so that it doesn't go faster than we can see. So we pause things here. I'll put in maybe a tenth of a second. There we go. So now let's get in the code for how we have it bounce. And I'll go ahead and just add that here. I'll pause and then you can just copy it in. Okay, so to get my ball bouncing off the walls, I declared two variables up top, two doubles, x and y, and we're using these familiar methods, the getx and getY coordinates. Then I'm just comparing them to the borders of my applet. If it's greater than 600 or less than or equal to 0, and the same for the y values, and all I'm doing is reversing the directions. So we reverse the x and the y. Now it's a little more complicated to have it bounce off the paddle, as you remember. To do that, we're going to have to get the paddle's x and y positions as well. So I'm going to create those variables. We'll have the player x position, and I guess the well, we're not the y position because the player's just moving left and right. So we'll use the far right side of the paddle. So we need the paddle's left side of it, which is px, and then eventually we'll set that up as px is equal to px2 is equal to px plus the width of the paddle. Now in order to do that, we'll say pz is equal to simply paddle dot getx, and the other side, what did I call it, not pz, px. And px2 is just going to be equal to that. I think my paddle was maybe 75 pixels, and that can be adjusted later. Now to compare that, first we're just going to make sure the ball is low enough to the equivalent of the paddle. So we're going to use y, the ball's y position, and let's say I think we had the paddle at where did we add that? 500. So I'm going to throw something anywhere near there. So we'll say if paddle's greater than 480, you can go directly for 500 if you want. But remember, I'm taking into account the width of the ball, so it doesn't bounce off the middle of the paddle. And we'll put in an and statement, and if it's less than or equal to say 150. So this just means that the ball has to be towards the bottom of the screen. Now if that's the case, now we can check if it's between the width of the paddle. And to do that, we're going to have another if statement, just like we did in Pong. So if x is greater than or equal to pz, meaning that the ball is far enough to the right of the left side of the paddle, and so it's not too far past the edge of the paddle. It has to be between the left side and the right side. So and x is less than or equal to pz2. In that case, then we can bounce the ball back. So we'll do something just like my equals negative my. And this may give us an error, which brings up some cool things. Let me fix these errors. Okay, so I was missing just a semicolon here, and I was missing my y here. And then I compiled it, yet I'm getting another error. We can't get these values for px. It's saying we can't get paddle. Now if you notice, we have this object created, but there is no paddle object created. The only other place we see this is over in Breakout. Actually, I have that in the wrong spot. So we could create an object of the paddle in here, but if we did that, that wouldn't be the same object that Breakout has created. So we'd have two different objects. So if we were trying to get the x and y values of one of them, of the one that Breakout's using, it wouldn't be the same. So this is where things can get really cool, is that we have passed parameters before back and forth inside methods. We've done things like integers, doubles, strings, but what we can do now, which is even more cool, is we can actually pass an object. So this is where things get really cool. So we can go in here into ball bounce and pass the paddle object. So this is pretty sweet. Now we have to be prepared to receive that. And the way we do it, just like we receive any parameters, we have to tell what type it is. In this case, it's the paddle with a capital P, because that's how we defined it. And then paddle. That should now allow us to use this. So let's compile this, see if it works.
Good afternoon.
So this one receives an object as a parameter, or sometimes they're called arguments. And once again, this one sends an object as a parameter. And let's see what our errors are. Cannot find symbol PZ. So let's check that out. And I went back and changed those because I had PZ listed when the variable we're using is PX and PX2. So that was just a naming error. Compile that. Recompile this one for grins. Run it. See if it works. Nothing doing. So now let's troubleshoot that one. Okay, what I've done to fix this, I made the paddle a little bit larger. I put it up to 150 to test, but that's a bit much. It did bounce. But there's one strange thing I've noticed, and that is when we add the paddle and give it an X value, meaning 150 pixels over from the left side of the screen, it's interpreting, the computer's interpreting that as the 0. the X is left side. So if we go too far to the left, it goes into negative territory. So I'm going to add the paddle on the far side of the screen, just so our coordinates are accurate, and then we'll see if that works for us. So if I can get over there in time, there we go. And then you want to make sure you test it so that it hits off both sides, or that it's reasonably accurate within the left and right side of your paddle. And notice that it did bounce when it's underneath my paddle, so I can trap it between the bottom of the screen and the bottom of my paddle. You don't have to fix that. That would just be quite a few more if statements, so that if it's going in the negative direction, that perhaps we don't allow it to check for collision. So get this coded,